Howdy, howdy!
Good day, everybody.
And
How
welcome-
is everyone feeling? Are we all good? Yeah.
To
Give those shoulders a little shake. Come on. Roll them forward, roll them back. Give that booty a little tootie.
But It Was Aliens, the paranormal comedy podcast where we probe paranormal events to determine for the questionable benefit of humanity whether those events really were paranormal. My name is Mr. Kevin, and along with me, with no idea what's coming up today, is Mr. Granville.
Granny Moonwalker.
Today, coincidentally,
I am fully aware that there is no child in the house, therefore I am let off the reins.
there is a dog.
Yeah, he's fine now.
Today, coincidentally, we are heading back to Poland in the year of someone's Lord, 1591.
Back to Poland!
Can't keep away. Funny how that sometimes happens. Completely by accident. September the 20th, 1591. Way back to Poland. Breslau, aka Wrocław or Wrocław. The subject of today's probe remains anonymous, so for the sake of us, we shall call him Betty.
Betty.
Now, Betty was a shoemaker, and a hard-working shoemaker at that. In fact, here's a little backstory. Betty was exhausted. Betty had been toiling away for many a year by this point. Years. Betty, allegedly...
Now we're black. Right, I reckon you put Betty in there so many times I can't do that every time you said Betty, so I'm just going to stop now.
Betty, allegedly, was also truthfully having problems at home, and as fate would have it, Betty's wife...
now in red.
fell pregnant. Poland was cold. Well, it still is cold, but in the 1500s, it was hard to get warm. Betty wasn't earning hugely well and needed to keep those fires burning for his growing unhappy family. The pressure had gotten too much. Then, just when Betty couldn't handle any more, the baby was born. That September the 20th day was the exact day that it had become too much for Betty. Newborn baby. Betty's wife put pineapple on a pizza, and just as they sat down to watch TV, Betty's wife spoiled the ending to Game of Thrones. It was the last straw Betty could take.
That is cause for divorce. Pineapple on a pizza and spoiling Game of Thrones. I remember when Game of Thrones was out and it was a weekly thing. Anybody put anything in the group chat, they were dead to me. Absolutely dead.
I lost 19 friends that year.
Well, I wouldn't call them friends, otherwise I wouldn't have spoiled it. There was 19 people I cut out from my life that year. 19 turds.
19 family members. Well, at least you didn't do what Betty did, because Betty took a knife and without even a stray thought as to his recently born child, Betty sliced his own throat.
Oh, god damn.
Betty took his own life. Betty's wife, who by the way was named Wifey, returned home having nipped to the corner shop for a pint of milk to find Betty's cold, motionless body. Horrific. You can only imagine how Wifey reacted.
Okay, there are going to be two reactions here.
Mm-hmm.
One, she is either going to go ballistic and be in hysterics, or she's just going to shrug her shoulders and think, for fuck's sake, why can't you do this outside?
Do it outside. The carpets.
Yeah.
God damn.
Not that, but like, I've now got to deal with this. It's in the house. If you would have done it outside, it's...
The carpets would have been fine.
Oh, whereas she's now got to move the body. if it was outside, she could just leave it. Tell the authorities that her husband is offed himself.
Yeah, and that's going to bring with it all sorts of suspicion.
But it's in the house.
Ah, the carpets.
Bad juju in the house.
Nobody needs that.
Right, can you imagine?
I can.
I
was imagining.
He's had enough. Couldn't take it. Pineapple on pizza. Spoiled the end of Game of Thrones.
Yep.
Disgusting. Newborn. And he sliced his own throat. So he's done all that so he doesn't have to deal with it. And now he is perpetually tethered to that location.
Can't
because
escape.
He's done it in the house. He cannot now leave from that house.
Yeah.
Not only that, but wifey is eventually going to find someone else.
Oh no. Things are going to go from bad to worse for Betty.
The paralyzer.
In the 1500s, suicide brought shame upon the houses of those who committed it. Wifey didn't want any of that noise, and so Wifey did what any honourable wife would do and called in her sisters to help Wifey clean her dead husband's body up before dressing him real fancy. Finally, when Wifey was ready, Wifey told the world what had happened, that Betty had died of a stroke. Betty looked so damn smart that the world bought it. It helped that the family refused visitors too. Furthermore, someone was hired to wash and seal Betty's wound before covering it and laying Betty in a coffin so that nobody could tell what had really happened come the funeral. When the priest visited to check out the body, no wounds were detected. In these times, those who took their own life were not permitted a good Christian burial. Wifey's little lie resulted only 3 days after Betty's passing in Betty receiving just that, a good Christian burial. And for the purposes of today's episode, unholy man given a holy burial, a pathway into the afterlife which he wouldn't be able to walk because heaven knew the truth. What do you think may happen to one who is granted the ability to walk the pathway of the afterlife but can't take the pathway to the afterlife?
It would be like walking to a bus stop, waiting for your bus to come and it never comes, and you constantly see everyone else's bus turn up and they get on and they leave and you're just there.
More misery.
Yep.
Seeing everyone else go on to happiness.
Either that or, like I said before, tethered to the household. Also, either the priest really didn't do a good job of checking the body, or whoever sealed the wound,
they called it in that day,
had some mad skills.
Possibly both. To be honest, I thought you were going to go a different direction here, so I'm just going to walk you back on path. In the 1500s, it was believed that if one committed such an act as to take one's own life, that one would be cursed to return to the world of the living as an undead creature of the night. It was also believed during the 1500s that if one was buried poorly, the corpse would be cursed to return to the world of the living as an undead creature of the night.
What? I'm really sorry to interrupt there, but this, I can't remember it, but it's an episode we've done, or I've heard it somewhere before, where someone died. I don't know if it was someone's brother, and they died and they were buried, and then they were found wandering the street. Is that something we've done?
We have done a similar one, yes.
Okay, cool.
You're getting deja vu.
Yeah, real deja vu.
Yeah, not this one, but we have covered a one not too dissimilar. If one was granted proper burial that they did not warrant having affronted the Lord, One would be cursed to return to the world of the living as an undead creature of the night. One could walk the pathway to the afterlife, but would have to turn back, no longer alive, but still of this earth. Rumours soon started to circulate suggesting that Betty may have taken his own life. We don't know if that person who was hired to clean Betty told someone or whether one of the sisters talked, but someone had clearly talked. The council listened, for the council decided to investigate. Wifey, though, had a cover-up. The perfect cover-up, because Wifey told the council that Betty had slipped and fallen on a rock and that a piece of sharp rock was found in Betty's clothing. The council believed Wifey. By Friday, September the 27th, 1591, though, sightings had begun.
So we have Betty and the council.
Well, Betty's gone, but yes, we do. I suppose we had Betty.
Do they turn out to be French?
No, this isn't Kung Pao.
Does Wifey end up Matrix fighting a cow at some point?
Also, no.
Okay.
That's not the pathway we're going down today.
Does Wifey at some point stick her tongue out and her tongue goes ay, ay, ay?
No.
Okay, so she's not the chosen one.
And Steve Oderick is not involved. Is that his name?
I think so.
Definitely a surname.
You sure that he's not involved?
I'm positive that he's not involved.
So do we think that the sightings began because there was already rumours that he took his own life, or is someone trying to frame Wifey and get Wifey into trouble? One of these weird, if you don't, maybe she had someone that fancied her and they're doing that whole weird, if you don't go out with me I'm gonna grass you up type shit. That horrible fucking shit that the likes of Gaston in Beauty and the Beast did.
Okay.
Marry me,
You're going
or
for
your
an
father
abusive...
goes to the insane asylum.
Yeah.
Beauty and the Beast, great film, by the way.
I do know where this episode is going, so I feel like I shouldn't really answer.
The original, not the remake. Fuck the remake.
Noted. Mr. Moonwalker loves his Disney. The sightings were usually at night.
Usually.
Betty was seen. At first, in the distance, just wandering around. It was just the odd villager here or there. You could downplay these sightings as just mistaken villagers. Indeed, the first villagers to see Betty return told themselves that it wasn't real, that they were mistaken. At first, Betty was just wandering around, and then Betty was groaning. But soon, those sightings started happening in public places, and soon they became violent and sexual. Betty would break into people's homes and get into their beds as people lay in them, smothering them. Betty began squeezing people really firmly, leaving finger marks behind. The unmistakable fingerprints of Betty. As you can imagine, as word spread, people started pooping their pants and sleeping in public together overnight to protect against Betty's visits, rather than risk a nighttime visit alone. Nobody wanted to be pinned down by Betty, mouth breathing all over you as a stray thumb pops down back alley. Nightly, Betty was visiting any townsperson foolish enough to sleep alone. The less frisky folks out there, those biding their time or choosing to live a non-physical lifestyle, sorry, they were getting it.
I suppose no one's tried to fight Betty at this point. And was this happening
It's hard to say. They've been smothered by Betty, but it's if they were asleep, you didn't really have an opportunity to fight, potentially.
Was this happening to both women and men?
I believe so, yes.
Was this happening to those that slept alone? As in, if a partner was in a bed, it didn't happen?
Yes.
Okay. Did Betty have a brother?
I don't actually know. It's not referenced in the research I read.
Does somebody
Someone
have
or someone
a preference? Not a preference. Is someone a sexual deviant and is
Clearly.
using
I feel like this is an accusation.
Betty's death to get their way and blame it on someone else?
Oh, I like where you're going there.
Do they look similar to Betty and are...
Some little sex pest has seen a way in to live out their fantasies and, not have the finger pointed at them.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm with you.
Because they've caught word of the rumour.
What a dirty little prick. Hold on to that for your conclusions.
Does that mean I'm spot on?
No, not necessarily.
Does that mean I'm 99.8% right?
Close to spot on. The sightings then begun taking place during the hours of daylight.
Daywalker!
Now, Anne Rice's interview with a vampire has told us that some vampires can endure small amounts of solar exposure without needing to sun cream themselves up. This whole avoid the sun thing is modern made up bullshit. Those who thought they were being clever staying up at night and catching some Z's during the day were in for an unpleasant surprise as Betty's chubby little fingers clamped onto them like a vice grip. By the 13th of December, 1591, which was a Friday by the way, Betty was being seen every single night. This went on for 8 months. For 8 months, Betty was bopping away half the town. Surely action would have to be taken.
So what's happened here is the individual has got brazen and the urge has become too much.
Mm-hmm.
Like
how when a serial killer starts.
they can't hold it back
and
anymore.
they start ramping up the... Yeah.
It's just escalating.
Mm-hmm. So your theory is now an escalating sex pest.
Yes. Not a sex pest on an escalator.
The worst kind. They're coming towards you and there's nothing you can do.
Especially on one where it's going down. Like they're just waiting at the bottom. You're trying to run and you're just getting closer to them.
Unless their shoelaces are undone. On April the 18th, 1592, the Breslau Council had had enough.
Council?
The most unholy of acts was to be carried out. Betty's grave was to be opened. Now, do not take this lightly. This was a religious place, and to dig up one's grave was an awful act reserved for the most diabolical of circumstances. The town had to be sure that no other action was suitable. On this date, they finally were. Once the lid was popped off, those watching on were horrified. The clothes had a repulsive smell, but the body gave off no odour at all. The body had expanded, but had not decayed at all. The body had not stiffened. On the feet, some skin had peeled away and was replaced with a stronger skin of the foot. I'm not sure if that means that there were basically some dead skin sock on the floor or what, but anywho. Betty's throat remained red and gashed. Most tellingly of all sorcerers of the day were marked, and sure enough, on Betty's big toe, there was an unmistakable rose-shaped mole. Mole, mole, mole! Mole!
So, either when they buried the body, they used some kind of embalming agent, which slowed the decay of the body.
Pre-mummification kind of works.
Yeah, and I think there's something that can be put in the casket that can slow it down.
Arsenic.
Like I think lead-based caskets will slow decay down. I think.
Okay.
I'm not 100%
I'm not familiar
sure.
with that, but...
There was a story about a nun that I read. I'm not going to go into detail on that because I might cover that, but... Or have we covered that?
Are we going to call that case
No, we
the
haven't.
nun?
One of my clients told me about that. I'm going to cover it. There we go. The nun.
Decision made.
The nunning. Yeah, so depending on what the casket is made of and what chemicals we use to possibly clean the body, may have slowed down the decaying process.
Okay.
So I'm not gonna jump to sexual deviant corpse of the night just yet. Not to say that I won't. Just not yet.
Okay, and the dead skin sock, new skin on the foot, suggesting that the corpse has been walking around and cut their feet and it's healed.
It just depends. Again, they cleaned up the body. So who's to say...
They didn't do some makeup on the feet.
When the priest saw the foot and when the foot had decayed or been left to the casket elements, something might not have happened or may have happened.
Okay. The body was left in the now open grave for 6 days to air, guarded by day at the grave and transferred to a guarded house at night. Curious townspeople came to view the body, and in the grave the body remained otherwise undisturbed. But did this quell the Betty attacks? In a word, no. Locals begun turning up with their blood sucked and their bodies pressed in increasing numbers. The Breslau Council first tried to bury Betty under more hallowed ground. The belief of the day was that to stop a vampire, you had to bury their body underneath gallows, and so this is what Breslau did. This actually only served to piss Betty off though, because the attacks were said to become more aggressive still. As more and more attacks took place, the corpse of Betty began filling out more and more. The town was so very suspicious by this point. With Betty having died from a trip and rock cut though, no drastic action could be taken by this God-fearing town. As we know, one's conscience can talk. The guilt racked up, and finally, Wifey had no choice. Wifey couldn't let the death and destruction continue. She had to come clean. Only then could the right action be taken to save Breslau. Wifey admitted to the suicide. The town could now act.
Clearly, the body is in view of the guards 24/7.
Supposedly, yeah.
They may rotate guards, but someone's watching the body.
What if they fell asleep in the house overnight?
24/7.
What if they fell asleep?
Okay, that's terrible if they did. They're guards.
They're
they should be aware.
Guards!
The body bloating.
Or what if this is, rather than the body getting up and doing it, it's the spirit of the body doing it, and that's feeding the physical body to the point where those two can combine in the future and become one powerful being.
Similar to bones.
Yes. Yes.
Possible. That's a really shit horror film, but I really want to watch it again.
On the 7th of May, 1592, Betty was fully exhumed. Betty was noted to be fleshier still, but the Lord's work had to continue. An axeman took to Betty, cutting off his legs, arms and head. Betty's back was carved open and Betty's heart was cut out. The heart was fresh. The body parts were chopped into teeny tiny pieces. Would that be enough? They weren't taking the risk. Betty's body was then placed on a pile of wood and burned, and then the burnt pieces were gathered up in a sack and drowned in the nearby river. It was hoped that this would both kill the undead Betty and prevent anyone from taking Betty's bits for magic spells and whatnot at a later date. Breslau was saved.
Or was it?
Or was it?
That little sexual deviant is
Laughing his arse
making a name for himself using Betty's moniker.
That is one hell of a way to end someone, all that punishment.
Well, I mean, they're already dead, so...
And then I'm going to cut off your head, then I'm going to cut you into tiny pieces, then I'm going to drown you, then I'm going to burn you, and then I'm going to kick you in the balls.
I mean, it'd be pretty hard to
put them back together.
To drown them, then burn them.
Put your ashes into a ball-like shape and stamp on them.
Stamped on your ashy balls. So didn't they burn them first and then drown them?
They did, yeah.
Okay.
Wait, is that what I said?
You said, I'm going to drown you, and then I'm going to burn you.
Oh, yeah, when I was talking, but
Yeah.
I was just being silly there.
Yeah, that's why I questioned it.
Yeah, they burnt them, then they gathered it up in a sack and dumped it in the water.
So, did anything happen to Wifey for lying in the first place?
We are going to touch what happens to Wifey next, but she wasn't prosecuted as such.
Wasn't punished.
I don't know that punished is the right word, and like I say, we're literally going to cover this in the next section.
Okay. Shall hold my tongue.
Yeah, so with that is the end of this tale. Or is it? We should probably cover what happened to Wifey. Wifey passed on sometime later, having lived in the shame of Betty's demise. When Wifey passed on, Wifey's body too was seen after death. Wifey assaulted a servant, beating the crap out of them so bad that their eyes were left blue and bloodied. Wifey was seen pinning down and pressing upon sleeping victims. It begun just as Betty had begun. Things escalated further and in new and disturbing ways. Next, Wifey's spirit was seen in the form of a hen. That's right, a hen rocking around Breslau with Wifey's eyes henning about. Then, a goat. These spirits soon begun bedeviling, tormenting others. What did Breslau do? That's right, they dug Wifey up, chopped her up and burnt her down. Next, Betty's former maid began appearing to the locals both as herself and as a cat. What did Maid do? I feel you could never have guessed that Maid would turn up in people's bedrooms at night, climb on top of them and pin them down. The villagers' response? Dig up, cut up and burn down. So your theory of a sexual deviant is really looking stronger and stronger at this point, isn't it?
I mean...
Same thing keeps on happening with a different person.
All they got to do is...
connected to Betty.
Get a wig. Change how they look.
Mm-hmm.
Because you're only seeing them at a glance.
Pinning you down. Dry humping you.
Did someone have it out for this family at all? Could they have paid villagers off to spread these rumours? Did Betty, Wifey and the maid help cover up something that one of the others done? And this is now the person punishing them for doing so?
So I didn't see anything like that in the research on this episode, but that's not to say that that couldn't be a cause.
Okay.
This tale was documented by 1600s writer Henry Moore, who was born in 1614 and wrote an antidote against atheism in 1653. Many have covered this over the years, but that is the main source. Now I ask you, can we explain any elements from today's case in other ways? Well, the expanding body of Betty in the grave could be down to the bacteria and associated gases in Betty filling up as he decayed. All it takes is one person unfamiliar with nature's order and boom, the rumour mill has started. The creature targeted those who had been away on a hard day's work most frequently. Those shattered souls who just needed their sleepies. Heavy sleep. Sleep paralysis. Could basically a whole village be afflicted by sleep paralysis at the same time? Perhaps in the olden times when people worked freaking long and hard, unlike Mr. Moonwalker here. Our last explanation of the normal realm is that of cats and dogs living together. Mass hysteria. Did this whole place genuinely experience sightings, only those sightings weren't really there? We could have had a mould mushroom event. We've covered before how that can happen near to rivers. Or did one person see one thing and the whole place got carried away, putting two and two together on what they were seeing in the distance after hearing that sighting, for example? Seeing a moving bush, putting those two and two together and coming up with a potato. Before we conclude, I leave you with this little fact. The vampires of old did not spread vampirism through biting. Olden vampires just needed to kill someone for that person to then become a vampire too. Don't believe the modern tales. These things go way back.
Okay, you say that, but that wouldn't explain Betty.
But what if Betty had always been a vampire?
And then just killed himself?
Pretended to kill himself, but was a vampire. If Betty had stayed around much longer, people might have realised that he was not getting old with the rest of his family, so he has to reset every now and then.
Pretty sure he could have just left.
Betty could be... Look, you. Don't look to the easy solution.
Don't look logically.
Betty needs a mass reset like every 15, 20 years to keep on doing what Betty's doing.
So what did he do? Wait and wipe out a whole town, and then 50 years later marries...
Exactly.
I mean, if he wanted to do that, he could make himself wealthy and then just claim that he's the son of someone. And as he gets older, puts on a fake beard.
Like the Count of Monte Carlo, whoever it was.
Proclaims to have another child. And that child comes back, looks just like him.
Not the Count of Monte Carlo. I can't remember what the episode was called. You know the one I mean.
I do.
It was your episode. It's gone.
Count of Vermont? Something like
that. In summary, we've today covered the tale of an anonymous shoemaker whom we named Betty. Whom took their own life in 1591 Breslau, leaving their wife and newborn child behind. Suicide brought shame and judgment upon a household, and so Betty's wifey, had the body cleaned up and claimed that Betty died of a stroke. Betty was given a proper Christian burial, which was an insult to higher power. Sightings of Betty begun amid rumour of suicide, but wifey assured the town that Betty had in fact died after falling on a rock. Betty at first roamed around moaning away, but as days passed, Betty began sexually assaulting people and pinning them down in bed. Eventually, the town had Betty dug up and watched 24/7, but sightings continue, which leads one to question whether it was Betty's physical body or spirit wandering Breslau. Betty's body was unusually fleshy, almost as if Betty was still alive. The town buried Betty once more under old gallows, which was a cure for vampirism at the time, but Betty's sleepy assaults continued. Wifey could no longer live with the lie and admitted to the suicide. Betty was dug up again, chopped into pieces, burnt, and dumped in a nearby river. You'd think that was it, but not long after, wifey died and sleep assaults begun anew. Wifey was dug up, chopped up, burnt and buried. The same thing happened with one of Betty's maids, and so they were also dug up and dealt with in the same way. This was the end of the Breslau vampires. We wondered whether this could be a combination of sleep paralysis and mass hysteria. Mr. Moonwalker, is there anything else you wish to wonder about before we wander towards our conclusion?
Did the sexual deviance stop when the maid died?
As far as I could see, yes.
Was the maid the sexual deviant?
They just got it wrong. I mean, possibly.
Or just coincidence that the sexual deviant died when the maid died around that same time?
Could also.
How many years was it between?
We don't know.
Okay. So that deviant could have got older, slower.
Yeah.
Didn't have the means to go about their ways.
Yeah, I was thinking that in the back of my head.
Could have been arrested or stopped or even killed for something else entirely and got away with their deviant ways altogether.
Yeah. Possibly.
Okay.
So on that note, are you saying that it was vampires?
No.
Why not, sir?
You know why.
I know nothing.
The fact that I think if this was sightings and sightings only, I would err more towards the side of mass hysteria or some form of hallucinogen caused by mushrooms. However, because people felt someone in that, did they actually see anyone? Or did they just feel them there?
Good question. Well, I suppose they must have seen them at some points to say that it was them.
But I mean, did they see them when they were like, they crept into their bed?
I believe so, but did they really?
Because if they didn't see anyone, I'm less likely to believe sexual deviant and more in group hysteria. But if they actually saw someone, or even just saw like that person's arms come around them and grab them, then sexual deviant.
Okay. Yeah, for me, this is one of those ones I'd never heard of the case before I picked it up, and I quite enjoyed looking at it, but yeah, just as I thought Betty was done, his wife and then his maid picked up on the assaults. Family business. Olden times were wild. But for me, wild doesn't necessarily mean true, and sadly this one didn't push me over that paranormal plank. I think this one was probably a case of mistaking sightings and misunderstood natural processes, alongside a healthy dose of exaggeration over the years. Our main source for this one was 1600s author Henry Moore, who themselves heard about this one from someone who claimed to live in Breslau at the time. Moore was also one of our main sources for the episode on Cuntius the Vampire, aka the Horny Revenant, which we covered on episode 3 of our Patreon, and Moore's book actually speaks out against such beliefs rather than in support of the claims. So yeah, I think it's exaggerated bullshit, basically.
I did think, actually, which I didn't say at the end because I totally forgot about it, Henry Moore is a writer. What if he just made the story up?
Yeah, possible, rather than being told things and writing them down. Moore could have just made it up completely, I guess.
Yep.
But again, Moore is saying these things shouldn't be believed, not that they should.
Okay.
Any final thoughts?
Would either he's making that up to persuade people that this shouldn't be the way to think.
That the supernatural shit is bollocks.
Yeah.
Follow science kind of thing.
And to get himself a career as a writer, maybe. Or he was told that, but just doesn't believe it himself.
Yeah. Well, that is a wrap for today's episode. So thank you for listening, but it was aliens. If you haven't heard enough, you can head on over to a secret place available to everyone on the internet called patreon.com/But It Was Aliens, where each month we release bonus episodes we call Side Probes. Basically, we cover paranormal tales with a little razzle-dazzle, a little pizzazz, a little butts-out nudity. You can gain access to these episodes for quite literally less than a cup of coffee. If that doesn't float your boat, you can probe around the globe yourself wearing some of our official podcast merchandise. Head on over to butitwasaliens.co.uk because we are British, and check out the podcast store. We built this ourselves, literally. So a few of the bricks are falling out of place, but we always deliver. If your boat remains unafloat, yes, that is allegedly a word, truthfully, but you do like this show and you have a suggestion for a future episode topic, we would love to hear from you. You can drop us a line on at But It Was Aliens. You could also say hello on Facebook, where connected to But It Was Aliens is a secret public private group called Extraterrestrial Towers. In reality, it's a teepee, and there you can poodle about. We read everything. This is a safe place where you'll be protected from the aliens.
For a small fee.
Don't worry about the sacrifice table. It's purely for show. The blood is fake. that is it for this episode. So until next time, if telescopes use mirrors, how do we know that there aren't any vampires in space? The truth is up there. Hashtag
Arg.